One jurisdiction where they had literally one person in their entire building department.
Yeah.
And soon after we submitted our permit package, that person had been reassigned or removed from that position. So there was somebody, they're still trying to figure it out, and there was somebody temporarily that was covering for that. So it was an interesting process, but they were already contracted with another third-party provider to do their, but still the routing, the fees, and all that had to be applied. There was just one person, and she tried her best, but it was a challenge, to say the least.
I bet a hurricane of some sort had something to do with our statute, but that's just a guess. Welcome to another episode of Blueprints to Punch List, Healthcare Edition. Today we have a very special guest from Elite Permitting, third-party provider that Dave's used in the past. Actually, I have not yet had the privilege of working with Elite Permits yet, but third-party permitting or third-party provider we have started working with quite a bit in the past. So we are excited to have Alberto on to speak a little bit about his company and the third-party review and inspections in general. So thanks for coming on, Alberto.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. It's something that we're really passionate about, just trying to make sure that communities have the opportunity to grow quickly and safely. So it's nice to get a chance to talk about it.
Yeah, awesome.
And we have Tyler joining us today too, from our estimating team.
Thanks for having me.
But yeah, Alberto, so you and I got introduced about 2 years ago when we did a couple of healthcare projects in the Sarasota area. And that was really, I think, our collective experience mostly we've done some private inspections through various municipalities that require it. Like they don't have their own building department, so they sub it out. But that was really my first time, and again, I think most of us experiencing dealing with a third-party reviewer, and as well as the inspector wasn't through the municipality, but it was hired private through you guys. And the process, I was just blown away by it, honestly. The simplicity, the calling in for inspections, the dealing with your inspectors was really smooth and just a great process and a great experience overall, helping the client really get through their project. So we wanted to dive in and talk about that a little bit. But before we do, we kind of start out every show by asking our guests what is a recent win that you had? And it could be business related, it could be personal, just in the last month or two. Is there anything that comes to mind?
I guess I'll go in a little bit of a bigger time horizon. I've been finding a little bit, because I'm very passionate about this, which is a surprise. It wasn't an industry that I first started my career in, but I've been able to find a lot better balance with work and life, and I've been really fortunate to do a lot of traveling lately. So over the past year and a half, I think I visited 6 countries, and I've done some trips to New York, Puerto Rico. I went to Europe for the first time. So kind of striking that balance so I can come back to work refreshed, and it's been awesome. So that's a pretty big win for me.
Really cool. Where did you go? Or maybe what's your favorite place that you visited in that time?
To be honest, anywhere that's walkable. I grew up in Santiago, Chile, and it's I didn't know how to use a hammer when I was a kid. I wasn't one of those kids. I was a city kid. I knew how to show you anywhere in the subway, on a bus, wherever you need to get to in a big city. So New York was big for me. For the first time, I actually went 2 times. I went to Portugal. I really liked Colombia. And right now in May, I'm going to go back to France. So walkable cities, I'm a big fan. Also, the dollar does go a long way, which is nice. I mean, the culture, the architecture is super nice as well. But yeah, it's just a big, big fan of like getting out the door and getting a chance to explore.
Very cool.
Awesome. Yeah, there's a great big world out there, and I enjoy traveling as much as we can as well. So cool. Thank you for sharing that. So diving in, I guess maybe just take us back to the beginning of Elite Permits, how they got started, and how you came to work with the company. And we'll just kind of get the ball rolling with that.
Yeah, I mean, this started from just observation. The owner, she's amazing. She's an engineer with a master's degree. Recently won like Woman of the Year for the CBIA down in Naples, and pretty active at the state level with legislation and representatives and all that kind of stuff. And she used to run Collier County Building Department, or be in management of some sort, to be a little more accurate. And she realized how little help people were receiving when it came to permitting, how I guess not welcoming sometimes the process can be, and decided to quite literally open up the first Elite office down the street on the same street, Horseshoe Drive, literally walking distance. Till this day, the office, we send people, a block down to take care of issues, and offer people an alternative to the building department, which, funny enough that you mentioned earlier, we've been in business for 11 years, and one of the conversations that we have more often is actually 2 of them. Is this legal? Which is yes, we're licensed the same way building departments are licensed. And then 2 is like, we didn't even know about this. And we still go into jurisdictions where we're one of the first few private providers, and we have to educate the client, educate the building department itself. And yeah, that's where it all started from. I think in many industries, you see that people have alternatives, whether it be healthcare, whether it be really anything. There's tons of alternatives. And a lot of times people think that their only choice here is to deal with the municipality. And they're pleasantly surprised to find out that that's not the case.
Yeah, I know for us, it was a pleasant surprise, and we've kind of utilized private providers often over the past year and a half. I think really since you and Dave worked together, and it was brought to light for us, really understanding, hey, this is part of the Florida. This is a Florida statute. This is allowed. This is, it's a great alternative. Like you said, there's customer service involved in your guys's in working with you guys, where you typically don't get that with the building department.
Yeah, I mean, I think something that we probably all experience when it comes to public services is that when you eliminate the money incentive, it really doesn't drive performance the way it needs to, right? There's a constant revolving door with local agencies, understandably so. And then not to mention that you're dealing with, I think, roughly 300 municipalities in Florida. So you have, a lot of variety in terms of processes or how that specific building official might feel the process should run. So particularly in the space that we have worked with you guys, which is that tenant improvement space, commercial space, where a business might find themselves wanting to open up several locations in a region, and you having that stability to work with one company, one set of reviewers, one set of inspectors, as opposed to, 7 different municipalities. I think it's a big win in that aspect.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Especially with the program work, right? Yeah, a lot of it, obviously, different challenges, different kind of layouts, but overall same stuff. And to your point, working with the same folks over and over makes that process much easier.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I know you mentioned, there's over, I think you said 300 municipalities here in Florida alone. How do you navigate the relationship between your private provider services and those building departments? Is that something that you find easy, easy connection on, or do they have a lot of pushback? Or
Well, let's at least let's table that and let's just get to the basics. What is private inspections and private review? Let's get that kind of cleared out for everybody, and then we'll dive into the specifics.
Yeah, fair enough. So when you are wanting to build in Florida, you have to abide by the Florida Building Code, and that requires you to submit a permit application through your local municipality. And when you submit your building application, you obviously have to undergo plan review to make sure that your plans are compliant with that Florida Building Code. And once those plans are approved, you obviously have to do inspections to verify that you're in fact building what's in those drawings in the stages that you're building, right? Because buildings go in layers. And all a private provider really is an alternative to that, right? So instead of going through the plan review with the local municipality, which their lead time might be 6-8 weeks, and in emergency cases, we've heard nightmare stories of 9 months or whatever the case may be. We have, since we've been established, have abided by a 3-day plan review time. So you can already see the difference there. Now, mind you, there's some exceptions when you go into some a little bit larger commercial jobs. We go to 5 days, sometimes maybe even a week. But there's still these guaranteed times for review, as opposed to you just dealing with whatever workload the local municipality has at the time. And not to mention that there is no guarantee that come that time, they're going to honor it, because there's no obligation to you. You're just, utilizing a public service just like everybody else. So come that 6 weeks, they might say, we need another 2 weeks. And there's nothing, since they have to accept every permit that comes through the county, understandably so, they deal with a pretty substantial amount of workload. And that extends over to the inspection side, right? So we always guarantee next day inspections, which allows the construction teams to have a little bit of certainty of like, this is what we can plan for. And not to mention, we try to show up to the job sites within a small window, between, let's say, 10 to 12. When you're dealing with a municipality, you're just 7:30 to 4:30. You kind of have to be on standby for that inspection. So maybe not to go, there's a lot more nuance to it, but the example that I always give to kind of relate it to healthcare is like, if you go to a hospital or an emergency room, you're just like another number. They'll get to you when they get to you. That's the kind of dynamic. As opposed to you dealing with perhaps like a private clinic or your family doctor, which is going to be appointment. They're going to know what you medical history is, and it's going to be what we call our firm like a white glove service.
Mm-hmm. Now, Alberto, can you guys handle all inspections, all reviews, or are there pieces that, really the building department still has to have a hand in?
So that's a very good question. And on the inspection side, we do conduct, I would say 90 to 99% of the inspections. You will see, let's talk about residential. So we deal with vertical construction. And in the residential, you do have, what we notice up here is you have arborists, which those inspections we don't conduct, like protection of trees and natural resources and that kind of thing. Sometimes even in Charlotte, you'll deal with like turtles and burrow owls and that kind of stuff. So those we don't handle. Also, engineering. So like your driveway, pretty much. So, but aside from arborists and engineering on the residential side, we would conduct every other inspection. Now, when you get into the commercial side, there's a lot more players involved. And again, to refer back to what I just mentioned, we deal with vertical construction. And in commercial, you'll deal with like perhaps like FDOT, the Department of Transportation. In you guys' cases, you might deal with ACA. You might deal with the fire department. So we don't completely bypass the municipalities, but we limit their involvement, particularly as it pertains to the structure itself.
The building itself, right? So you guys don't
Yeah.
handle anything with the civil, the site.
No. Since we are, like I mentioned, kind of a white glove service, our service entails of four things. It's the plan review, the inspections, the permitting, which is all the paperwork, like the boots on the ground stuff. But you do have a project manager. And the project managers, even though it's not assistance to the same level as somebody with a license, through osmosis and to dealing with so many things, because we built so many hospitals, we done industrial sized concrete plants, we done dealerships, banks, you name it. They have contacts and they learn things. So they will kind of involve themselves to some extent, because our approach as a company is to make sure we get you to the finish line, not to say, hey, we did our part, kind of figure it out, sort of thing, sort of approach.
Yeah. Awesome.
So then going back to kind of Tyler's question there, how do you manage the 300 plus jurisdictions and the relationships?
Yeah, there's got to be some that aren't, there's got to be some municipalities that aren't fans of it, right? Or do you generally find a lot of acceptance?
So I guess I'll speak about it from two different places. One of them being, sorry, there's a little bit of background noise. But on a personal level, I think it did take some adjustment from me. Because my background originally is from hospitality, particularly the food and beverage space. And it's a very strong character space. And you quickly learn that that doesn't really quite work with the municipalities, because you have to work with them. So you might win that battle, but you have to go back the next day with a different project, and you're met with a lot more resistance. So I learned that even though there's statutes and there's regulations and all these other things, there's people on the other side of that, and you want to try to work with them and understand the workload that they're dealing with. So from a personal aspect, it did take that adjustment. And then from a industry aspect, there's absolutely that. There's the private providers were brought into place as an alternative to deal with the excess load. It's an alternative for people that have the means, because it's not a very inexpensive service. But from its incision, it was intended to, when the building departments are drowning, when there's state of emergencies, when there's all these kinds of things, here's where the private providers come into place. Mm-hmm. Now, obviously, the building department is funded through permitting fees. And some municipalities do meet you with resistance. And I guess I'll be a little bit daring by saying that it may or may not have to do with that aspect, because they don't receive the fees for the services that we're providing. Mm-hmm. And that's in some instances where there's those two sides of the coins, where there's some jurisdictions that welcome you with open arms, that they need the assistance, they want the assistance, even to the extent where private providers get hired by the municipalities to work their projects, like internally, without really the public knowing. Mm-hmm. But there is the other side of that where, we're seen more as competition, and perhaps maybe even a more aggressive narrative where somebody might come to us and say, hey, here's a bunch of money, like approve these drawings, like, kind of look the other way. Mm-hmm. So that's the whole breadth of the space. And people believe their own thing within that.
Yeah. And I mean, there's so much, I think, to unpack in that, what you just said, because it's a complex, process, right, of what's usually involved. But as far as building departments welcoming this, especially ones that have departments that are completely overloaded, and they have a backlog of 6 to 8 weeks, is and sometimes we don't even need a full, it's not a full build out, or it's not a brand new building, but you have to add a room, or you're doing small modifications, but now you're making the client wait 6 to 8 weeks to review, and then if they come back with a comment or two or more, then the whole thing gets just expanded. So
Right.
the timeline of that gets cut down significantly. Whereas again, they have the backlog. It's not like they're not busy. I think most jurisdictions in Florida right now are pretty much at capacity, just from based on and from our experiences of dealing with them. So it is, I think, a complementary service to what you guys are doing. Because essentially, if you guys take, and maybe there's a percentage that you could speak to of how many or how much do you think, what's the percentage for these private provider services versus a standard plan review? Like, do you have a sense of what the current Florida market is seeing in that?
Excuse me. I apologize. As far as the market, not too sure in terms of giving you a specific figure, but we have seen over the years more and more private providers in the market. People coming from other states. Sometimes you are able to become a private provider if you're an engineer or an architect. So sometimes people taking that sideways step from a design to the compliance space. So not sure as far as like a figure, but definitely a lot more people involved. Now the point of the barrier of entry is not quite as easy. It's not like you just get to, get some equipment and kind of start a business. Like you have to have, in our case, we have, we have engineers, we have plans examiners, inspectors, building officials. So we kind of have the full breadth of what's available, but you do have to have these licenses that are not so easy to obtain. But definitely a lot more competition in the recent years.
And in Florida, we have a Florida statute that's part of what allows you guys to do this privately. How long has that statute been out? And do you know kind of the reasoning why they had introduced that?
I don't know exactly the length of the statute, but I think like we just kind of mentioned, it was with the intent of like, okay, when there is hurricanes, when there is state of emergencies for whatever reasons, floods, all these kind of things, there's just the building departments cannot keep up. And I think I have a pretty strong opinion in this space where there's just I will say, to kind of make sure I address this correctly, is I do think that most building departments want to work with private providers, and Elite has taken the approach of like to gain ground and say, hey, we want to work with you, we want to give you everything that you want, just tell us what it is, and kind of build that relationship as opposed to pull in different directions. But I think that was the intent of the statute. It's like sometimes you have those unique circumstances, like the emergencies, the floods, all that kind of stuff. And then also you have smaller jurisdictions that sometimes just can't, like you have like the Lombo Keys or the cities of Home Beach, where the department as a whole might be a dozen people. Mm-hmm. And those are the areas that get affected more aggressively, and then people can't get back into their homes with flood and electric and wiring and all that kind of stuff. There's sometimes things that can't wait for bureaucracy; they just have to be taken care of. So there's a few different facets as into why I think it was created. In addition to us having our own building code, right? Like, I don't think this is the case in the entire United States. I know it's the case in California. I know it's the case in Florida. And that's also an aspect where people get blindsided heavily. They come to Florida thinking that they're going to build. Like, I know sometimes people, like, in other states, they walk in and they walk out with a permit. I'm like, there's not even the easiest permit in Florida is that way. So
I've had one jurisdiction where they had literally one person in their entire building department.
Yeah.
And went soon after we submitted our permit package, that person had been reassigned or removed from that position. So there was somebody, they were still trying to figure it out, and there was somebody temporarily that was covering for that. So it was an interesting process, but they were already contracted with another third party provider to do their, but still the routing, the fees, and all that had to be applied. There was just one person, and she tried her best, but it was a challenge to say the least.
I bet a hurricane of some sort had something to do with our statute, but that's just a guess. I wanted to kind of go back. I know, Alberto, you kind of earlier had mentioned something along the lines of this kind of being a premium option, right? Which I think I understand, but in my experience, the costs are somewhat comparable, right? Because now you're not paying the city those review fees, you're paying you guys those review fees. And while I think those review fees are a little bit more, generally speaking, than what the city would charge, in my experience, it's pretty comparable.
Yeah, I agree. And that's kind of been one of our biggest driving points. I think people still struggle with the sort of just seeing it the way you just brought it up, where they just see it like, oh, I'm just not used to having this additional $7,000 to $8,000, $10,000 expense. But yeah, I mean, part of the statute is that the building department cannot charge you for the services that they're no longer providing, and that helps to offset our cost. So particularly on the stuff that we done with you guys, the tenant improvement aspect, yeah, I think it's a tit for tat. You almost walk away even.
Yeah.
And I mean, you're undoubtedly getting just a much more effective service.
Right. Yeah, no, it's, for us kind of, and it is a little bit of an added cost, and increasingly so when you get into the ground up stuff versus the tenant improvement stuff. But for us, it's been a great option. We utilize it as much as we can, and the city still gets their fees, right? They still assess impact fees. They still get fees for review on the fire side, and they still have their piece, right? And speak to that a little bit. You guys, and you might have before, but you guys don't review or inspect on anything fire related. Is that right?
Correct. So no fire. And to kind of give, I guess, anybody listening the most accurate information, and the statute gets revised because sometimes it's a little vague, but the way it reads is that they have to give you discounts for the services that they're no longer providing, but they can charge you a reasonable administrative fee, because we still, like, our inspections reports still have to be submitted to the county for public record keeping. We still have to request a CO. So whatever kind of cost they incur from managing private providers, even though their workload is a lot less, they can still charge for. Like you mentioned, impact fees are still in there. And obviously, we do the structural and MEPs review, but other reviews like utilities or fire or natural resource protection or FEMA reviews, they can also bill for. Now, some of these things are intertwined, right? Like sometimes some of the components of life safety are intertwined with fire, and same thing with building and FEMA, from just like a building perspective. But yeah, they still, it's not like they're out of all the funds.
Right. Yeah.
So what are some other, what I want to ask you is, can you walk us through the process? So client comes to you, says, hey, we're interested in having you guys do our private review and private services, what do those steps look like?
So it's fairly easy. Like we have certain timelines in which we operate as a company. So if you get us a contract, now I will be frank, we had an exceptional increase in business lately. But when we get a set of plans, we submit a bid within 24 to 48 hours. Once that's paid, retainer signed, we have what's called our first deliverable within 3 business days. And what we call that, it's like a silver platter. We spoon feed you everything. So we say like, here's your pre-filled docs that you're gonna need for the application. Here's a checklist of any items that you're gonna need, whether it be energy cogs, site plans, product approvals, even just like advisory items that we don't deal with. Because again, we do take that approach of let's make sure you're going the right way. Like if you need to submit an application to DVPR, or you need to make sure that you're good with ACA, or you need to make sure you're good with DEP, even if you do your best diligence through the building department websites, nobody will advise you on those things because there are things that are unique to your project. So pre-filled documents, checklist of items needed, and those review comments from our plans examiner. And literally your goal at that point is just to follow that list item by item, resubmit that back to us. We submit the permit for you. We monitor it. We make sure that like you don't get rejected, because now people also struggle with the portals. Like you might not be familiar with Acela. You might not be familiar with Project Docs. And it's very unforgiving where if you submit your application incorrectly in these portals, it's not like hey, please come back and fix it.
Right.
Your application rejected, start over. And now you got to do the whole thing again. And it's pretty brutal. Like we understand it because we deal with it. And sometimes we even need like a little bit more encouragement, a little bit of like, particularly my team. And we're a team that's been doing this for 11 years, with every resource imaginable. And from there, we monitor the application, we get it issued, and then, you call us in for inspections. But I guess to kind of illustrate a little bit better without kind of boring people too much is you wouldn't really purchase a home without a real estate agent. You wouldn't really do a lot of things without the guide of our professionals. So you going into the building department blind. They ask you for something, you don't know if it's required. You don't know if it's not. From a building code point of view, right? You don't know if it's a municipal ordinance or somebody that the reviewer just wanted to ask you for. And you're just going in there like with very, very little likeliness of succeeding. Now, obviously companies that have built for a long time and kind of are ingrained in their communities, they have a better chance. But I think that's the best way that I can put it. It's like you want somebody that's gonna represent you and tell you everything that you need from all angles, right?
Yeah, and tell you up front too, right? It's it helps.
Yeah, because I mean, you guys know best. It's not just the building department. You have to deal with sometimes like asbestos and DEP stuff, health department stuff. In the case, sometimes you have septic, you have wells, sometimes you have fire stuff, you have DOT things, you have just so many different variables. And the great building departments will give you like a checklist and a starting point, but that checklist is going to be cookie cutter. Mm-hmm. Like we just did a house out in Siesta that has a pool on the like a part of the house is a pool on the second floor. Mm-hmm. So then you tell me you have a residential checklist and you have a pool checklist, and it's like, how do you combine the two? And then you throw in there that they have an elevator and it's a 4-story house, there's a threshold building, and I get why people get dizzy over it.
Yeah, absolutely. We do it all the time, and I think still get dizzy over it. It's just, like you said, it's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of different governing bodies, and each project is specific, right? So what it involves and what that looks like can change drastically from project to project, municipality to municipality. So yeah.
Yeah, you could have done a project in, say, Fort Myers, but then the next project is a half a mile, but now it's outside of the city's jurisdiction. So now you're dealing with the county, which is a whole another different jurisdiction and paperwork. And so even if somebody that has built commercial or residential, you could go from one jurisdiction to another, just even being so close to each other. You think, oh, the process is going to be the same.
Yeah.
When in reality, it could be something completely different. So what are some of the most overlooked items or permitting requirements that can cause delays in projects, healthcare projects or otherwise, that you are seeing?
I think it's a bit of the some of the items that we mentioned is understanding all the governing bodies that are involved, whether it be the DVPR, the DEP, because even the best building departments do not have that set up. Even at the residential level, it doesn't mention anything about utilities. So I think a lot of the times if people don't do their diligence and they're not properly advised, they go in thinking that they only need this thing just to be met with like, hey, you did everything on the building side, but before we can release this, I need approval from the health department. And sometimes a lot of the governing bodies that are involved, they tend to be state level bodies, and those are real slow. So then you're kind of go through that process, and particularly on the commercial side. On the residential side, you deal with the septic and that kind of stuff. But on the commercial side, like if you have to on the back end get DVPR approval or get something from ACA, or even something that we deal with a lot is in the cannabis space, like because I don't know if it's at security reasons, but they like to work with private a lot. They have to go through OMMU, which is the governing body for that. And I think that's arguably the most overlooked aspect. It's just understanding really what goes into it. And sometimes what ends up happening is people come to us, they say, nope, you guys are too expensive. 3 months later, they want to try it on their own. And then they're like, hey, please help me, because
help us.
I wasn't aware of what I was getting myself into. And we try, pretty passionately to say like it's you're going up against a monster. And if you're not like, maybe like a group like yourself or a builder, you really won't understand what all the moving parts are. And to kind of tie it back to what we mentioned earlier, that you were saying, even like, say you were in, I don't know, even in Sarasota, you're Sarasota County, but now you're a little bit south, you're City of Venice, in a completely different process. That could happen even within the same department, right? Like you might get one reviewer hits you with this type of comments. You get another reviewer, he gives you different type of comments. Mm-hmm. Same thing with inspectors. It's much like law. Like there's a lot of interpretive aspects to it. So the people that you work with are going to have their own version of things. And not to mention, in addition to the ever ongoing rotation of building departments, changes of building officials, changes of permitting staff. So I think that's the most overlooked aspect, is just the sheer complexity of what you're wanting to do.
Yeah. So make sure identify key stakeholders and identify them early, and make sure checking their boxes to get done. One question I had or wanted to get your take on, right? You guys do both review and inspections. Obviously the city does both review and inspections. I've always, and it's probably mostly fear-based or unknown, right? But I've always thought, if you guys are reviewing, I want to have you guys do the inspections, right? Or I never really thought of, or haven't experienced, I should say, say like the building department doing the review and you guys do the inspections, or you guys do the review and building department do the inspections. Is that a typical setup? Do you guys typically try to avoid that? Is there some challenges associated with that? What is kind of speak to that and what that looks like?
Yeah, I mean, I would say undoubtedly there's challenges. There's a section in the statute that the building official has the power to make you do inspections if you did the plan review as a private provider, which I've seen 99% of building departments enforce. Now, on the flip side, if the building department did the review inspections only, it's something that's, I would say, it's very common, but not plan review only. Now, our firm prioritizes full service because we feel like it's the only way that we can guarantee the outcome. And even then, sometimes there's things that, just like we mentioned, all the moving parts that we have just now, but then you throw in their people, and you throw in their people with 20, 30 years of experience. I feel like it should be done like this. It should be done like that. So yes, you do have some building departments might let you do plan review only, might let you do inspections only. But for our company, we try to prioritize full service, but we do have a good bit of inspections only. Because as long as you haven't done an inspection with the jurisdiction, you can elect to work with a private provider. And maybe that's another thing that I want to throw in there, which is that sometimes people feel, some building departments or people think that this is like something that needs to be approved, or this is like your right. You're right as a professional in the construction space, like to work with either the public or the private. It isn't something that needs to be approved or granted or only allowed in some instances. Like this is like we've been talking about the entire conversation, part of this statute. So
yeah, more often than not, that's what I find myself explaining to clients. Like, they're like, are we sure we can do this? Is this allowed? Are they going to allow us? And I always come back to this is a Florida statute. They now certain building departments probably handle it differently and want different things and do things differently, but they can't really say no, right? So finding out what that looks like is important, and understanding what the building department is going to want is important. But working with you guys is always an option, or any third party for that matter.
Yeah. And that's where our owner, Tatiana, she works heavily on ensuring that the statute remains effective for the people in the community. So she constantly meets with representatives and boards, the Manatee board, the one in Collier County, and communicating like, this is the issues that we're coming across. Even very, very simple things like there's state issued private provider forms. Simple, right? You go to any jurisdiction, you use the same form, you add a private provider, you go about your business. Mm-hmm. Well, some municipalities thought that it would be pertinent to add their own form. Mm-hmm. So now you have to chase their paperwork, and which is not always readily available. So there's this constant push and pull between the private and the public to make sure that I guess everybody has their say in it. But I think Elite's approach to this whole thing has been, we're not here to make it difficult for you. We're not here to take your business. We're not here to take your staff. We're simply here to help the people that want this alternative. And we just try to do it as amicably as possible. And by us being as effective as we are and providing really professional work, it's when they receive it, that's kind of like a part of the product that we considered it as well. It's like we look at the product that we would put forward to a company like yourself, but our product is also what goes into the building department. Because if our package and our documents are out of whack and our review's not good, the reviewer, because there is audits as well, they do have the ability to do random audits to make sure that we're, doing our job and not being fraudulent, so to speak. But that's an aspect that was a really big light bulb for us, which is like, okay, yes, we have maybe the owner of the building. Yes, we have the contractors, the architect, which are all Intel partners and clients. But our product also goes in kind of what kind of reputation we build in the building department side.
Yeah, yeah. You want to be known on that side of things. Well, I guess on all sides, but that side of things, you definitely want to be known as a company that does things by the books, and that way you have trust, right, with the building department. And I've always found it's helpful when folks at the building department can trust that you're out there doing the right thing, right? When it comes down to inspections for us, even on site, even when we are working with the building department, and I'm sure you guys, because you're always working with the building department.
Yeah, and the thing is it's an ecosystem, right? So like our owner comes from public. Many of the building officials we have ran building departments for years, so they know what it is. Actually, a good amount of the inspectors that we hire are like guys that are retired that
Yeah,
like
that's what we find.
got tired of the pina coladas and the palm trees, and they're like, man, I gotta do something. So we give them a few hours, and they do work. So they're all people that know what the other side of the coin looks like.
Mm-hmm.
And again, that's where
and and they respect that side of things too, right? Which I think is how it all is able to work.
Absolutely, and I think that's so important because to kind of put myself out there is like that's what I didn't understand originally. Being again from hospitality and food and beverage and wine, which is my background, which is very demanding. Like if you want your product in our business, like this is how it's going to go, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, just knowing how hard, how difficult it is on the public side and how hard they have it. Yeah, it's crucial.
Yeah. Those. It's so important that you brought that up. I think to address that specifically. That one, you're the people who are reviewing these plans on the private side, as well as the inspectors, are in many cases former building officials or former they work for building departments. And the one instance too, the one of the projects we worked on was the reviewer. No, I'm sorry, the inspector, Greg. He was, I think, former building official for the jurisdiction that we were working in. So, and it's not that these guys are going to be taking shortcuts or anything like that, but it just shows our clients, gives them that extra peace of mind that these guys have been on the other side and they know what they're looking for. So it's just, I think that is important to kind of point out that your staff is very much they were in the trenches before, and they're not necessarily somebody that's brand new, fresh out of college, necessarily with sort of no experience in the field to know what they're looking for, because you're trusting them to have their back and to be able to enforce and look for the things in the field to make sure that everything is compliant.
Yeah, and I guess I'm so glad you brought that up because big shout out to Greg.
He's awesome, by the way.
He's
we had a
awesome.
Great time with him.
Till this day, he's somebody that my team is probably, excuse me, tired of me talking about. But he was so passionate about the industry, and that man was a walking encyclopedia. Like quite literally, anything you would ask him about code, he either had solid knowledge on or had an inkling of what needed to happen. Yeah, and I think it's we prioritize. That's one aspect that we're very, very serious about is educating our inspectors and technical staff. That's why we have engineers. That's why we have ex-building officials. We have people that used to be chief mechanical inspectors at whatever jurisdiction. So we try to go above and beyond what's really even needed for the inspectors. One, because again, we all not only look at it from, yes, we're trying to get your building up and running, but it's a securing your asset sort of thing, right? So
right.
we have liability on these projects for about 5 years. while the municipality is immune, right? So if they miss something or whatever, everything falls back on the contractor. So we're trying to not only make sure that we move you quickly, but that we are, like, if it's your dream home that you're building, or your first restaurant, or your investment property, that, like, it was actually built to code, and how it was intended to happen.
That's huge.
So there's a lot more in common that we have with the building departments and with people in general, like people like Greg. Some of these people are part of the community that have been working with builders for 20, 30 years. And even though it's a big market, you cross paths with a lot of people in construction.
So you guys are based mainly on the southwest of Florida, Naples, Fort Myers, Sarasota is where you have offices. Outside of those areas, can you go to, say, Orlando, Jacksonville, Miami? Can you cover those areas as well, or are you location specific?
So there's a few things to unravel with that. Is we leverage something that was introduced to the statute, which are virtual inspections, but we also do so very carefully because of the standards that we hold to ourselves to, and we only do it for certain types of jobs, primarily ones that don't include any structural work. So we have done, like, let's say, tenant improvements or smaller works, basically all the way from Pensacola down to Key West. Now, our technicals team, they're not where we're based out of. Our technical team, we have people in Vero Beach, we have people in South Florida. The majority of our people is where our offices are, but we have, plans examiners and sprinkled throughout the state. So in some instances, we're able to kind of do the beefier inspections in person, the structural, and then leverage, smaller things like maybe like a UFER inspector, like an underground conduit that's just like a wire, an encased wire. You do that virtually. And both of those inspections have their advantages. Like, we have really advanced technology, and as I sit here on one phone, I have my other phone here. It's got 3 cameras, so it's like sometimes you get to really see some cool details through a camera. But also on an on-site inspection, you have the feel and the touch, and you're kind of that type of examination. And as a company, we are kind of aiming to open up an office once a year. So our next market is going to be the South Florida area.
Awesome. I have one other question. So is it better for the owner to hire you specifically, or do you also work with contractors? If a contractor
it doesn't really matter to us. Like, we've been, as long as they pay, I guess.
Kind of important.
But there's the owner's required to know of our involvement, right? And that's referred to as the fee owner. So the owner of the building is required to know of our involvement. But as far as like who hires us, it doesn't really make a difference. But we like to operate very transparently and probably be in touch with all the participants in the project.
Good to know. Do you have a favorite project that you worked on?
I think what's really attracted me, I don't know about a favorite per se, but what really attracted me to this industry, because I was really only planning on being with this company for like a year. Like, I'm a South Florida kid. Like, we don't even think anything north of Boca is even Florida. It was that kind of mentality. And then, I kind of, Sarasota's got a lot to offer. And I stay here, but the tangible aspect is that, like, we do banks, and I drive by that bank every day, and I saw it from plans, and maybe went out there to do a site visit. So I think that that tangible aspect. Like right now, we just got something signed for a jet hangar at the airport. So I'm like, wow, like when I go to the airport or whatever, and we'd also done a couple restaurants in there, which, those may come and go. But I think that aspect where the team gets motivated to see the tangible nature of the impact that we have on the community makes it really exciting. And not to mention that we undoubtedly have some cool projects. Like we have some houses that are like 20,000 square feet. Like these houses that I was mentioning to you, that are like 4 stories, pool on the second floor. On the residential side, I think we done crazy residences. Like even properties that have like 9 permits, like a pool house, a pool, a west wing, this other wing. It's just like, and I think it speaks to the power and the variety that you can come across in construction. So I think all of it, that's pretty neat. I'm a pretty big nerd when it comes to some of this stuff.
Yeah, I'm with you. Being able to see the physical, tangible asset that you worked on and put effort into is pretty cool. By the way, up here we feel the opposite. Anything south of Boca is not considered Florida.
Definitely the Miami area.
I mean, Orlando
No offense, Miami.
Orlando's growing crazy. I think I've heard a little bit about some of the infrastructure things that are going to happen in Orlando, and it's mind-boggling, to be honest.
Yeah, no, it'll be cool when we're all connected by the via Brightline and some of that stuff. So.
That's definitely something we need, is a little more easier travel between Florida for sure.
Yeah. So one of the questions I had, so we see the benefits from using the private provider and inspection services from I think from a timeline perspective on these projects is a huge thing. We also know that onboarding with Elite gives them with a team that is abreast in the inspection field, working with municipalities. Do you foresee a time where this private provider becomes the industry standard, and why or why not?
I think I'm one of the few that I think I'm pretty outspoken about some of this stuff, and some people try not to ruffle any feathers, but I think it's without a doubt, right? Like you look at anything, private, and it tends to perform better. Again, when you eliminate the money incentive, and I don't know that anybody's like lifelong dream is to work in a building department. So you have that constant revolving door of people, and those are the first people you encounter. So that more or less determines your experience. So with the statue, the way that it's set up, with the, if we're able to demonstrate that we can, because I don't discard the fact that some private companies might do whatever, right? They might look the other way, or they might do inspections in a way that it's not really kind of walk that gray line, so to speak. So I think it's up to us. Like Elite's responsibility is to really demonstrate that we can be integrity driven and provide something really efficient. But you see it all throughout, right? Like you see, Charlotte County is a big one where they, a great deal of their reviewers are third party. Mm-hmm. So when we're dealing with them, trying to contact them, it's never a Charlotte County email. It's like it's another I guess government staffing kind of gig. So in one facet or another, you see it. One of our main inspectors, who was actually trained by Greg, Brian, he was from Pennsylvania. The whole department was presented as like, I don't know, whatever department it was, but Pennsylvania, the city, I don't know. But it was ran by all private. Internally, it was all a private company. Mm-hmm. So I think it's a matter of time, but I think, honey over vinegar, and try to really demonstrate that, we're trying to do the right thing. Yeah, like we're here to make money. Like that's not nothing to not recognize. But I think we can do so ethically and providing a good service.
Yeah, I'm with you, and I don't think in like an overtaking way or a replacing way, just adding value, right? And being able to do that in a more efficient way for all involved, right? Because
For sure.
to
Yeah.
your point, these building departments that are maybe 5-10 people max, obviously it fluctuates, but may have a couple hundred things on their desk. So the ability to
Right.
do that in a timely manner is just not possible.
Yeah, I mean, I think you look at any market, competition's healthy, right? Like people want alternatives, let them choose, provide a fair playing field for all of them, and let the customer base or the clients kind of decide.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, this has been great, Alberto. Thank you again so much for coming on and educating us and our viewers on this topic, because I just don't think enough people know about that there's a service like this that exists.
Right.
So you guys coming on and doing the work that you're doing and really be able to share some of the things that on here to somebody looks at this and goes, well, what is a private review service and what is private inspection? So they'll have a good opportunity to get educated on this subject. So how can they get a hold of you, get in touch with Elite? Their phone number, a website, an email, that's best way to contact you?
I think the easiest way is just to Google us, Elite Permits of Sarasota, Elite Permits of Fort Myers, Elite Permits of Naples. I think we try to have a decent footprint online. Like we have YouTube videos and that kind of stuff. So if you just throw us up on Google, you'll find us. Our website will do the rest if you really want to do business with us. And thank you guys. I think it's super cool that we need to bring some modern things into a seemingly always lagging space that construction is. So it's cool to talk about it. It's cool that people know about it, because again, I think just let people decide, and as long as they know what's available.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Alberto.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Alberto.
guys.
Yep.
Have a good one.
We'll see you guys on the next episode.